Hi, class. We've been going through some lessons on ethics and ethical decision making by individuals as well as individuals in companies. And so today we're going to broaden our conversation a little bit about maybe the role of corporations in the world and corporate social responsibility. And so the first thing we're going to do is take a look at a video by Harish Manwani, and he talks about how he sees corporate social responsibility in the real world and in the corporation that he works for. And then we're going to talk some more about business ethics theory and corporate social responsibility. And so Harish Manwani joined Unilever as a management trainee in 1976, and now, as of this writing, he is the company's chief operating officer. So we're going to pause now, watch this video, and then we'll take up the conversation after it. So hopefully you've watched the video now, and so we'll want to unpack a variety of concepts and thoughts that he talked about. The first thing I want to kind of discuss in his video is his challenge of what most people believe as the point of businesses. And so I teach economics, and so if you've taken my economics class, you'll know that I talk a lot about self-interest and the motivation of profit. And right, so I guess historically, or what's common known to be believed, is that businesses, corporations, individuals are all motivated by this kind of self-interest, right? And Milton Friedman states there is one and only one social responsibility of business: to use its resources and engage in activities designed to increase profits. And so this is a statement that's widely acknowledged and widely believed, yet we are trying to challenge that notion, challenge that reality that this is what businesses should be trying to do. And so that's where we get corporate social responsibility.
Of growth that is responsible.
So when we talk about what corporations do, Harish Manwani goes on to talk about the invisible hand and talk about how companies are motivated to do best for themselves. And so they're often always looking at growth, companies growing to be consistent. You want consistent growth, you want competitive growth, and you want profitable growth. And so these three things have been pillars of economic growth for countries through businesses, right? And so now he wants to introduce a fourth G of growth that is responsible. And so now, can we truly expect companies to grow responsibly? And so that's the question, that's the hope, that's the belief that we want to try to accomplish. So if we look at those four G's going to responsibility, and so the question is, how do we convince companies to do this, right? Where hopefully we want companies to do this on their own because they believe in it, because they believe it's right. But ultimately, we need to get to a point where companies choose to do this, and it actually makes sense for companies to do this on their bottom line. And so we want companies to accept that they can do well by doing good, that the process of doing good for the world is going to make their companies do better and be more successful, right? And so we want to ensure that we put in place systems that reward them for doing well. We as consumers want to reward them for doing well by doing good. And so he continued to talk about doing well by doing good, but then to unpack, how does a company do this? And so I feel like he broaches on subjects that we talked about before. We talked about vision, mission statements. Should your value system be ingrained into what your business does? And so in reality, what's the point of your business, right? Is the point of your business to sell a brand to make money? And so some people will say yes, right? But in reality, our businesses exist beyond that. And so he states we want to define the role of a business within society beyond the products and brands that they sell, right? No business's mission or vision statement says we want to sell more pairs of shoes to make the most money. That doesn't happen, right? So if we bring it back to their core values, what do they believe in? That's going to push them in a direction that hopefully will be corporately socially responsible, right? We want businesses to be purpose-driven, what ultimately is their purpose and what are their values, and is that going to lead them to making this world a better place? And I'm going to say for the vast majority of companies, if you bring back to their core values and the core reason for why they exist to a certain degree, we're going to get to places where, yes, these businesses do want to do better for the world. It's just a matter of holding them to that and to making sure that they want to do it and to make it profitable for them to do so, to make them believe that it makes sense for them to do that. And so ultimately, Harish Manwani talks about these thoughts and explores the fact that businesses can make a lot of money, but they can do it by being responsible to the world, right? They can do it by defining a purpose beyond profit, thinking about choosing to be responsible, wanting to be responsible, right? Wanting to take part in their communities and wanting to be a solution rather than just a consumer of goods, right? You have to believe that the most powerful companies in the world want this. Otherwise, it gets quite depressing. And so we have to hold them accountable as consumers to make them want this and to make them want this more. And so please ensure that you've watched through the video, because there's lots of intricacies that we haven't really touched on here. But he does believe that if we are purpose-driven and values-led, companies will hopefully engage in socially responsible practices on their own. And so what is corporate social responsibility? We understand that, but how do we keep companies responsible, right? There are things called social responsibility audits, right? These things assess an organization's accomplishment in areas of social responsibility. One category will be concern for ecology, environmental quality, truth in lending, product safety, consumer protection, aid to education, as well as services to communities, employment practices, diversity practices, progressive labor relations, employee assistance, and corporate philanthropy. And so you'll find in this day and age right now, this is a huge topic among companies, has been for the past 10 to 20 years, but your generation, the generation just before you, is keenly interested in these types of things, because we see the state of the world, and we see that things need to change, right? We can't let companies just run amok and just doing whatever they want. This is the same as governments. We can't let that happen, right? So we need to hold companies and all other parties responsible to ensure the future, right? And so corporate responsibility audits are one ways that governments and industries do this. And so we have to look at companies who do social responsibility audits and choose to do social responsibility, and we look at it in a few different categories of motivation. And so the first category is compliance, right? We act to avoid adverse consequences, right? So if you fail your responsibility audit, or you do things that are not so good, but you just do enough to avoid the fines and penalties. Yet the second is conviction, right? How convicted are you on being different, making changes, not just doing the bare minimum, right? We want companies who act on conviction, so the audits aren't even necessary. So they're doing more than what the audit requires. So we want those types of companies to flourish and to thrive. And so even in compliance and conviction, we can kind of take this and take it a little bit further. So in compliance, we talk about economic compliance and we talk about legal compliance, right? Companies are going to be compliant economically. Obviously, they need to do whatever they can to be economically viable, as well as do whatever they can to satisfy and fulfill the legal requirements that the government has of them, right? Again, much less than conviction. Conviction, you want to have a higher ethical standard, and you want to use your discretionary power and spending to make the world better, to abide by certain criteria and go above and beyond. And so, again, we want to spend our money, we want to put our resources into supporting convicted companies to do better, right? And that's going to motivate more companies to be in this conviction landscape versus the compliant landscape. Because the compliance landscape companies, some of them are just doing the bare minimum and often try to skirt or go away from or to avoid responsibility than taking responsibility, right? And so here is just a visual look at what this looks like. You know, you have to be profitable, you have to be able to stay in business, and then you want to obey the law, you want to do what is right, and then you want to make better, right? Doing what is right is fine, but then do you want to make things even better is where ultimately we want our companies to go. And so companies often will fall into 4 responsibility strategies, right? What do companies actually do if they're, compliant or convicted, regardless of what they say they are? What is what they're doing? And so the first and the worst is obstructionist, right? They avoid responsibility, right? They're going to do the bare minimum to survive, and they don't do anything above and more to be responsible. The next is defensive. Does the minimum legal requirement, meets their legal responsibility, they're not going to get fined, they just do the bare minimum. Okay? Accommodative, they do ethically what's right? So anyone who questions them, can't really question them because they are doing what is publicly and widely believed to be the right thing to do, right? Again, and so this is not a huge kind of like, oh, they're amazing company. They're just doing what people believe is right generally. And then there's proactive, right? Proactive companies take leadership, right? They're going to take the next step. They're going to be the first at the front of the line to take this step into, environmentally clean practices, or taking the steps into saying we're going to make sure all our production is, has good types of labor, right? We're going to make sure we do that even if it's going to cost us a bit of money, right? So we want companies to be proactive, to take steps to doing more. And so that was our social responsibility conversation, and we want to make sure we've watched the video and we've gone through what that might look like and how that might impact our lives as well as lives in companies. And so when we talk about that, it leads us to wanting to discover more about what are strong leadership practices. And so for our homework today, beyond just watching these videos and reviewing our notes, I want to ensure that you've all now selected a leadership book that you're going to read. And so some of you have already chosen some, but now we want to make sure that we are all assigned one that we can get to reading. And so now, starting today, you should be bringing this book to class every day. You should be having it at your desk every day. And so at any given moment, you can be reading this as something to be doing as part of your assignment. The rubric for this assignment will be posted as well. Thank you.